We have with us Dr. Ajit V. Sapre. Good afternoon, sir.
Yeah, good afternoon.
Uh, would you talk about the new things or the new technologies which is going to make an impact in the chemical sector?
And I think I look at chemical sector as a somewhat broader than just the pharmaceutical and petrochemicals. I would include both agriculture as well as the energy itself, because at the end of the day, energy and economy are two sides of the same coin. And as India looks for growing our economy to say beyond $5 trillion, energy would be very, very critical. And in the era of climate change and net zero, the whole issue about energy transition, where are the sources of energy that are low carbon that will help us to grow our economy is going to be critical. And so in that context, there's a lot of focus on green hydrogen, splitting water, for instance, and that is still very expensive. So we need new inventions, and I think in my mind, the Indian students and professors and the community at large, including industry, need to be focused on saying how do we become the first to the world, invent new technologies, commercialize them to monetize them. And so we need to be very bold. We shouldn't be seeking essentially endorsement or some sort of an active engagement of our Western colleagues. Because in the time of change, this gives us an opportunity to leapfrog the world by doing our own things. And this is a perfect opportunity because, in my mind, the fast followers will never catch up with the first movers. So, when such things are changing, whether it is related to climate change, whether it's related to world economic change in terms of the power shifting from the west to the east, this is a great opportunity for India, and we must take this opportunity. I know we just were celebrating the 100 year of Indian chemistry, and certainly we need to look beyond. So, as a Bharat, we need to wake up and say, history is great to learn from, but the whole century is ahead of us where we want to be the leader, a world leader. And for that to happen, many of our institutes need to be worked together. Today, I see we have great institutes like IITs or ICTs, and then we have great industries like Reliance and many others. But to invent and innovate and implement, we need a very coordinated approach of a multidisciplinary group of people who have a common interest, a shared interest, and are engaged in all skills, right from invention to implementation. So I think there are two things we need to do. We need to have our students be well educated in terms of not just understanding the science, but an integrated approach to science, engineering, and most importantly, economics. Because end of the day, nothing happens commercially unless it has some commercial value of economic sense that's adding value to the society in whether it's a new products or new services or entirely new way of looking at business models themselves. So, if you put a dash of common sense with the science, engineering, and economics, then that's a winning combination. And so, we need to look at how do we create the next generation students and entrepreneurs and the business people who can propel India and leapfrog us beyond the way traditional way of saying I'm doing better than yesterday. So I think that is one of the opportunity we do have, and so the business and the technical community, in my mind, has a great opportunity to work together and take us forward in this Amrit Kal that Prime Minister Modi talks about.
You talked about energy and what we can say less carbon intensive technologies which will help India to be self-reliant. If you can talk about these technologies and how will they help
Yeah,
moving
sure.
forward?
Sure. I mean, there's a tremendous push today on renewable energy. I mean, certainly we're talking about great investments in solar and wind. Certainly people are talking about battery because any intermittent source of energy, either you need a backup power like grid, and we need to essentially decarbonize our grid. And today, we are moving from coal to more of a natural gas, and then people are talking about green hydrogen. There are multiple ways to make green hydrogen. There's a lot of focus on splitting water, but we need new inventions here because the cost of splitting water is still very high. There are certain technologies that are going to get commercialized, which are related to, for example, biomass gasification to make green hydrogen. And essentially, you have to think about hydrogen today is used where it is produced. So I think we need to look at the use of green hydrogen, for instance, whether it is from splitting water or from biomass, which will be far more cost effective. To say decarbonize industries like cement and steel, use it in our refineries and petrochemical plants or fertilizer plants. To me, those are a better use cases than, for example, transportation. I mean, it may work for example, trains or big truck fleets, which are very concentrated supply requirement. But for a mass transport, to me, electrification may be a better option. Now, certainly, you have to make green electricity, and just solar alone and wind alone will not be able to do it. So the whole idea about the future, whether it is molecules or electrons, will play out with the winning strategy becoming relevant as the economics improve. So the other opportunity really is the waste conversion to value. So there are a lot of things happening in the mixed waste plastic conversion in terms of recreating the oil that can be reprocessed to make plastics and closing the loop. That's a very important opportunity, and we must exploit it. The other is really municipal solid waste and other organic waste. And if you think from a fundamental perspective, all energy comes from sunlight. The fossil fuel is nothing but the old sun that essentially got trapped as a biomass, and that biomass over the years got cooked into whether it's happened to be a crude oil or natural gas or coal. And so if you use today's biomass with today's sunlight and convert that biomass to oil, to that extent it will also reduce our dependence on imported crude oil. And so one can convert the organic content of the municipal solid waste or agricultural waste into a green oil. So just like Indian government is promoting green hydrogen, green oil should be considered as well, because to me, green oil is a much higher volumetric energy density. So it's cheaper to store, cheaper to transport, and you can actually exploit the current investments already made in the infrastructure. Once you start looking at hydrogen beyond use for, say, cement or steel in the concentrated locations, the infrastructure cost will be overwhelming because the cost of storing and transporting could add anywhere from $2 to $4 a kilogram, even if you were to make a very cheap green hydrogen by future new inventions, because today's technology is still expensive, and just scale alone will not get us down to the cost which is affordable. So my perspective, if you look at India and our population and its desire to climb the ladder of prosperity with various constraints that we have, we need to think beyond innovation. We need breakthrough inventions, because in my mind, innovation is more incremental, is more implementation. So we need to focus on inventing new things. We need to think about our young people taking much greater risk, going beyond what is known. And if you make the unknown a reality with a new knowledge, a new science, and integrate that with engineering and economics, and create a new products and new services, that could take us forward in a big way, rather than just doing what was done somewhere in the West and customizing it for the Indian customer and Indian environment. To me, it's necessary, but not sufficient. So my task in terms of motivating young people is really, start with something unknown, and you will finish something unforgettable. If you have elements of science, engineering, economics, and a dash of common sense integrated, and think from a first principles of how one can make a difference, not just think about what is done somewhere else and how I can adapt it for Indian conditions. I mean, we should do that anyway. But if you really want to be the first mover in the world, both academia and the training of the students need to be much more focused on creative thinking and first principles understanding, and that could make a big difference.
And you were talking about China in terms of they failing and moving ahead in terms of innovation. So how can we learn from them?
I think to me, many seniors have told me that where India was and China was in terms of our scientific contributions or understanding, way we were looking at, our industry, were roughly the same in say 80s and 90s. But certainly, if I look at China today, I mean, they have leapfrogged in many different ways. And if I just look at the chemical industry, for example, they focus quite a bit on converting coal because that was their resource. But they developed so many new technologies where they took risks. They failed. Certainly, government took some of that risk. And in my mind, if I look at our national labs, to be honest, we have plenty of labs where the money gets distributed. And in my mind, that could be more focused. And it is not just some mission-oriented projects which are distributed, but truly concentrated activity, an activity which is focused on a translational research. Because we may be good at publishing paper and saying we're creating knowledge, and then now we're saying, oh, we are patenting, and somebody's buying our patent, so we get excited. To me, that's irrelevant. At the end of the day, you need to be in a position that your knowledge get transferred through a translational research, which is far more complex and expensive proposition. You need to build those pilot plans, you need to build those demo plans, take a risk of building a first commercial plant, and be willing to fail. And now who is going to do that? Maybe some large industries can take that risk, but the governments can certainly take those risks. Because in my mind, the government of India does spend a lot of money on research, but it's not very productive. And some of the seniors did move a needle from just publishing to say patenting. We need to take that next leap forward and say, hey, now I'm going to commercialize it. Maybe government of India should focus on building demo plants. It's happening today that they're giving a lot of incentives for new energy technologies. But we also put money in terms of building and taking risks in building the first plants, building those large-scale demo plants. And even if you look at the petrochemical refining industry, it's such a large industry, but many of the catalysts we don't make. We don't have such facilities. We still depend on importing materials. And to me, this is an area where you just look at what are the future technologies. We are talking about AI, we're talking about a bunch of other things where we're making progress. But to me, those are low capital intensive industries, and we should absolutely do that. But where we lack effort, in my mind, is the high capital intensive industries, which is related to their energy or petrochemicals or, in pharmaceutical, we're doing much better. But again, there we're quite a bit dependent on, some intermediate APIs coming from China to make the finished product. So we should get into that and take that risk and do it ourselves. I mean, things are happening, don't get me wrong. All I'm saying is that we need to accelerate that if you want to be a modern economy, with a goal of $40 trillion, not just based on consumption, but based on more efficient use of resources. Because in my mind, with the climate warms up, many things are going to rapidly change. Whether it's the water resources or whether it is related to agricultural productivity or just the way in which, we need to provide services. So I think I wanted to think about the future and work backwards and put resources and energy on scale. At the end of the day, scale matters. And once you go to a larger and larger scale, that's where the investment risks become bigger and bigger. And certainly who takes those risks has to be managed between the industry and the government. But I think China did that reasonably well, in my opinion. Because in many areas, if we look at all the future technologies, whether they're renewable energies or EVs, or even, I was just listening to them, they are quite certain that they would put a first fusion reactor commercially viable sooner than even in the West. So in my mind, actually, nuclear energy is something very, very critical. And, we should in India put a lot of effort in nuclear, both fission and in my mind, fusion as well, because fusion will be reality in less than 10 years. And if we're not playing that role now, we will be doing a lot of catch up. And I'll say that again, the fast followers will never catch up with first movers. And the first mover involves risk. So I think we need to be able to take that risk, willing to take that risk, and fail early if needed. But otherwise, you won't learn. And you won't become a world leader. And that's my sincere opinion.